What's up, everybody? Welcome into Verts. My name is Harrison Graham. 4 out of 10 NFL head coaching openings have been filled. And so we're going to take a look at the other 6 jobs, where things sit, and my predictions on who lands those jobs. So Jeff Hafley is off to Miami. He is their new head coach. Kevin Stefanski is the Falcons' new head coach. John Harbaugh is the Giants' head coach. And then Robert Saleh is the Titans head coach, and that leaves Arizona, Baltimore, Buffalo, Cleveland, Las Vegas, and Pittsburgh is the remaining head coach openings. Who do you guys think is the best hire so far? If you think it's Jeff Hafley, let me know. Kevin Stefanski, John Harbaugh, Robert Saleh. Be hard to go against John Harbaugh. If I had to rank it, I'd probably go Harbaugh 1, Stefanski 2. I would debate Saleh and Hafley 3 and 4. Probably whichever guy gets a better OC is probably the one I would pick. Okay, let's start with the Ravens. I think Jesse Minter ends up being their guy. He interviewed with the Raiders yesterday. He's interviewing with the Ravens today. This has kind of been one of those cycles of don't let the guy leave the building if you want to lock it down. And clearly the Raiders either A, didn't want to try to finalize, or B, Minter was like, yeah, I'm not going to turn down an opportunity to interview in person with the Ravens, a place he coached for 4 years. He's worked under both Harbaughs for a long time now. It's been pretty quiet out of Baltimore, like who they really like. It feels like they like Minter, Anthony Weaver. I thought Brian Flores would be a fit, but I don't think he's getting an in-person interview. He was part of the initial round of interviews with the Ravens. So I would guess it's either Minter or Weaver, 2 guys that have worked in that organization. And I think it's going to end up being Jesse Minter, and then we'll see who he brings as OC to coach Lamar Jackson. All right, the Buffalo Bills. I guess Brian Daboll. I mean, I don't have great feel for this one. I could see them maybe going with a guy like Davis Webb, who was in that organization for a little bit as well. They could promote Joe Brady. So they're going to have some different options. I do think they're going to go offense. And look, if Josh Allen kind of voices, voices who he wants, I could see Daboll being that guy. He helped develop Josh. He was his OC from 2018 to 21 before he left to be the Giants head coach. There's something that feels weird about getting fired by the Giants to then become the Bills head coach. But in a cycle like this, where there aren't those like true A-lister candidates, I could see this being a real possibility. And another side angle here that I find fascinating when it comes to Brian Daboll, this coming from Diana Rossini, the Eagles are conducting their offensive coordinator search with the understanding that Brian Daboll wants the Bills head coaching job, but if he doesn't get it, he's going to be the Titans offensive coordinator for Cam Ward and Tennessee, which is fascinating because, one, that kind of tells you, I don't know how many people want this Eagles OC job. And 2, he really liked Cam Ward. If you remember last year in the draft process, he really, really liked Cam Ward. He liked Jackson Dart too, and that's who he ended up with in New York. But, despite coaching Jalen Hurts at Alabama, he apparently does not want the Eagles offensive coordinator job. I don't know who the Eagles end up getting. They interviewed Matt Nagy today, who was the runner-up in Tennessee behind Robert Saleh to be their head coach. The Chiefs have replaced him with Eric Bieniemy as their OC, so Nagy's now looking for other opportunities. I don't love that fit for Philadelphia, so that's a polarizing situation. Who's going to be the offensive coordinator in Philly under Nick Sirianni? But Daboll, it sounds like, is either going to be the Bills head coach or the Titans offensive coordinator. All right, what is the better job right now? Type BAL for the Ravens, BUF for the Bills. I would lean in terms of like which quarterback I'd rather coach in the short and long term. I'd lean Josh Allen because I think he's got a better chance to age better. Obviously, both guys use their legs. But I do think Baltimore's roster and historical just front office decision-making, stuff like that, you would lean in the Ravens' favor. So you could really argue either way here. The Bills' division outside of New England's pretty easy right now. Miami and the Jets. AFC North historically is tougher. So they're both great jobs. Let me know. BAL for the Ravens or BUF for the Bills. Okay, I'm going to stick with Chris Shula with the Steelers. There does appear to be some momentum for Mike McCarthy. It seems that buzz is real, but I'll stick with Shula, who they've been very interested in. A Chris Shula Nathan Shieldhouse combo from LA is something that's been really intriguing for Pittsburgh. Now, there does appear to be a Brian Flores factor here. He interviewed to be their head coach and is in the mix as well. But it sounds like the Steelers would like to get Flores as their DC, which can happen. His contract expired from Minnesota. So if Flores wants to take a different defensive coordinator job, he can. In Pittsburgh, if they do hire Mike McCarthy, knowing they can get Brian Flores, they could sell Flores on, hey, McCarthy's in his 60s. We view this as like a 5-ish year deal. There's a world where if things go well, you could be our next head coach. And that might be more appealing to Flores than going back to Minnesota, where Kevin O'Connell's a young guy and doesn't appear to be going anywhere. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that does appear to be an option, or at least a possible scenario that could play out for Pittsburgh, pairing those two guys up. Again, Shula could potentially bring Nate Shieldhouse with him, the pass game coordinator from L.A. He's also in the mix for a few head coaching jobs. So there's a lot of moving parts with all these situations. How much does this weekend's games factor in, right? Like if the Rams win, then it's like, well, the Super Bowl's another 2 weeks away, so you're going to be waiting for a while. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. But I think Pittsburgh has a couple of different avenues that they could potentially choose to go down. Is McCarthy in his 60s the right move? I don't know. But if you can get Brian Flores as DC, that's pretty appealing if you ask me. All right, the big game is almost here, and there is no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than on PrizePicks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means this is your last chance to get into the football action before next season. So close the season out right with PrizePicks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Find your community on PrizePicks. With the new social feeds feature, you can share PrizePicks lineups with your friends and family from winners with a single click. You can copy lineups you like or use them as inspirations for your own picks. You can even follow PrizePicks partners like us and tailor-fade our picks with just one click. You can search me at HGramNFL. You pick more or less on stat projections. That's how you play. Tons of stats out there, all sports available. And if you hit, you win money. A little two-player lineup for this weekend's action. Give me Matthew Stafford, more on his pass attempts. I'll also take more than 7.5 rushing yards for Sam Darnold. $20 lineup to win $60 today, or once these games conclude. Download the PrizePicks app. Use our code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. I'm going to go Klint Kubiak for the Raiders. A new report from Jordan Schultz today is that the Raiders want to hire an offensive head coach, and Kubiak was one of the names that he mentioned. Here's what he had to say on his YouTube show. He said the Raiders are believed to be focused on an offensive-minded coach to pair with the likely number 1 overall pick in Indiana's Fernando Mendoza. I've heard a lot of Klint Kubiak and Davis Webb here. John Spytek, the Raiders GM, and Tom Brady will make this decision collectively. It's probably worth mentioning that Brady has called a ton of Seahawks games as of late and has another one on Sunday. Why is that important? Because Brady has had a firsthand look of Klint Kubiak's offense. I do like the idea, especially if you've made the decision or are pretty close to making the decision on drafting Fernando Mendoza, of going with an offensive hire. Do not pair him with the defensive coach. That is not a good idea. Pair him with an offensive head coach. Now, I'm really intrigued by the idea of Davis Webb, but if you're the Raiders, that almost feels too risky. Like, you've had a lot of swings and misses here. Klint Kubiak is well connected in this league. He could bring in some assistants with him. He's been calling plays. He's kept the Sam Darnold train going from last year, so I think he gets some credit for that as well. You bring him on board. They could bring Dirty with him potentially to be the defensive coordinator from Seattle. He's been highly touted in this coaching cycle, even had 1 or 2 head coaching interviews. So I think I would lean Kubiak here. The Webb thing is interesting, but you could kind of swing and miss there if that doesn't work out. So I'll lean Klint Kubiak for the Raiders for now. Speaking of a swing, how about Grant Udinski with the Browns? The 30-year-old whiz kid from Jacksonville. He's their OC, non-play caller, but I think he did get to call some plays in the preseason. Jordan Schultz says that the Browns are willing to go young at head coach. He said this is a team that could target a coach that's a year away if they deem that coach is a future star. Jags OC Grant Udinski, who just turned 30, and Rams pass game coordinator Nathan Shieldhouse both had excellent first interviews and are now finalists. There's also a question in league circles about how Jim Schwartz, who the Browns would really like to retain as DC, would react to a hire like that. He's also been in the mix to be their head coach. The sense is their preference is to go young if the right candidate is available. It feels like the Browns are trying to thread this needle of, we want to go with one of these young up-and-comers, take a bit of a risk, but a calculated one because we want to keep Jim Schwartz, former head coach, our current defense coordinator, has the defense rolling, has the pulse of the locker room, and pair those together. I think if I'm Cleveland, I go to Jim Schwartz and say, look, we're going to hire one of these guys. We understand if you're frustrated by that and want to pursue other opportunities. We're willing to make you the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. Because if you hire Grant Udinski or Nate Shieldhouse, you're not going to have to pay them top-of-the-line head coach money. This isn't the Bears giving Ben Johnson $13 million per year. You can probably give him like $6, $7, $8 million bucks. Hey, Jim, we'll pay you 6 or 7 as well, and there you go. You split the money that way. Give him an associate head coach title as well. He's done really well with that defense and has been a bit of a stabilizer. I like that idea. Get Udinski, get Shieldhouse, pair him with Jim Schwartz and go from there. And in a cycle like this, why not take a swing if you're Cleveland, right? Like, I don't love the idea of a retread there in that situation. Like, get a young up-and-comer that you can grow this franchise with, bring back the DC who has the pulse of the team, and get to work. Because the defense is playoff ready. It's one of the best defenses in the league. You got to figure out quarterback and figure out the offense and the identity on that side of the football. If you can do that, Cleveland, if they hit on a quarterback soon, could be competitive relatively quickly. But you got to get the right coach and you got to get the right quarterback. Okay, Cardinals. I'll stick with Vance Joseph. I don't have a great feel for this one. When a coaching search feels quiet, it makes you think they're waiting on somebody who's still coaching, right? When it's quiet, it's like, who are they eyeballing? Well, Vance Joseph is still coaching. Davis Webb is still coaching. Pair those two guys in Arizona. Davis Webb's going to have head coach looks, obviously, which we've discussed. But Joseph coached for the Cardinals. He was a DC for 4 years under Cliff Kingsbury. He's rebuilt his stock and his image significantly since his first failed head coaching tenure in Denver. To go back to that franchise and be as good of a DC as he's been under Sean Payton, I think speaks volumes about his character, that he's willing to do that. And look, the Cardinals' job doesn't seem that desirable. So if you can get Vance Joseph and pair him with Davis Webb, you could do a lot worse, right? Especially in a cycle that has 10 head coach openings and not a lot of, again, A-lister type of candidates. So you bring in Joseph, you bring in a young OC, and you figure out what your plan at quarterback is, what your plan is with the number 3 pick, and you go from there. Okay, what is the worst head coaching job that's open? Is it Arizona? You could argue it. Tough-ass division, and the owner is not the best from what's been out there publicly talking about Michael Bidwell. You could certainly mention the Browns, but they have 2 first-round picks. They have a lot of talent on defense. Let me know, worst head coaching job out there. Normally you'd say, the Raiders, but they do have $100 million in cap and the number 1 overall pick, so those things are appealing. And Vegas, people want to live there, so you've got that as well. All right, that's going to do it for Verts. We will continue to discuss the latest news, rumors, everything else surrounding the coaching carousel and the National Football League as a whole. Hit that subscribe button. See you guys soon.